The soft glow of the Chicago skyline filtered through the window of Emma Wilson's downtown apartment as she stared at the prenuptial agreement sitting on her glass coffee table. 36 hours before she was supposed to marry Brandon Reynolds, her world had been turned upside down. The document had arrived by courier that morning, accompanied by a note from her future mother-in-law that simply read, "A formality. Please sign before Friday." Emma's fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages again. After 2 years of dating Brandon and 6 months of engagement, this was how his family chose to welcome her, with a legal document that essentially classified her as a potential threat to their wealth. The prenup stipulated that she would have no claim to any Reynolds family assets or businesses in the event of divorce, regardless of the length of the marriage or her contributions to their life together. "They think I'm after their money," she whispered to herself, the realization burning like acid in her stomach. Emma glanced around her modest but tastefully decorated apartment. As an educational software developer, she lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. Brandon's family, with their Lake Forest mansion and generations of legal prestige, had always treated her with a thinly veiled condescension that she had chosen to ignore out of love for Brandon. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "Mom mentioned they sent over some paperwork. It's just standard family protocol. Don't worry about it." Emma set the phone down without responding. She walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a worn leather hatbox from the top shelf. Inside was a collection of letters, photos, and legal documents, the remnants of her relationship with her grandmother Rose, who had passed away 3 years ago. Rose Wilson had lived in a modest bungalow in Evanston, growing her own vegetables and shopping at thrift stores. No one, not even Emma until after Rose's death, knew that the elderly woman had built an investment empire worth millions through decades of shrewd decisions and compound interest. Emma pulled out the final statement from her private bank. $7 million. Plus the educational software company she had built using a small portion of her inheritance as seed money, now valued at nearly $2 million more. All of it invisible to the outside world, including the Reynolds family. She'd kept her wealth private not out of deception, but from lessons her grandmother had taught her. Let people know you for who you are, not what you have. Brandon knew she was comfortable financially, but had no idea of the true extent of her assets. They'd always split expenses fairly, living within what appeared to be their middle-class means. Emma reached for her phone and dialed a number. "Harold Winters speaking," answered a deep, resonant voice. "Mr. Winters, it's Emma Wilson. I need your help with a prenuptial agreement. My own." The Drake Hotel stood majestically against the backdrop of Lake Michigan, its iconic sign illuminated against the early evening sky. In a private dining room on the mezzanine level, Emma sat across from Brandon and his parents, Rebecca and Samuel Reynolds. Harold Winters, Emma's attorney, sat beside her, his silver hair and impeccable suit projecting exactly the gravitas this meeting required. Rebecca Reynolds, her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, wore an expression of barely concealed impatience. "I don't understand why this meeting was necessary, Emma. The agreement is quite standard for families in our position." Samuel nodded in agreement, his Harvard signet ring catching the light as he tapped his fingers against the mahogany table. "Brandon stands to inherit significant assets. The prenuptial agreement simply protects what has been in the Reynolds family for generations." Emma met their gaze steadily. "I understand the importance of protecting family assets, which is why I've brought my own prenuptial agreement to the table." Brandon looked confused. "Your own prenup? Emma, that's not necessary." Emma finished his sentence. "I disagree. If we're being thorough about protecting family assets, then mine should be considered as well." Rebecca's laugh was light and dismissive. "That's sweet, dear. But there's really no comparison between—" Harold Winters cleared his throat and slid copies of Emma's prenuptial agreement across the table. "My client proposes a mutual agreement that protects both parties' assets equally." Samuel picked up the document, his expression shifting from dismissive to perplexed as he scanned the pages. Brandon leaned over to look, his eyebrows rising higher with each paragraph. $7 million? Samuel finally spoke, his voice having lost its patronizing edge. "And a technology company valued at nearly $2 million? There must be some mistake. Emma smiled. No mistake. My grandmother Rose left me her estate 3 years ago. She lived simply in Evanston but built an investment portfolio over 60 years. I've since used a portion of that inheritance to fund my educational software company, which has been quite successful. Rebecca's face had drained of color. But you live in that small apartment downtown. You drive a 6-year-old Volvo. I choose to live within modest means, Emma replied. Something my grandmother taught me. She grew up during the Depression and believed that true wealth wasn't about displaying money, but having the freedom it provides. Brandon was staring at Emma as if seeing her for the first time. Why didn't you tell me? Emma's expression softened as she looked at him. I was waiting for the right time. I wanted to be sure that what we had was real, not influenced by money. And truthfully, after meeting your parents and sensing their concerns about my intentions, I became even more protective of this information. The silence in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Samuel Reynolds had removed his glasses and was pinching the bridge of his nose, a gesture Brandon had told Emma was his father's way of processing unexpected information. Rebecca was the first to recover. Well, this is certainly illuminating, but I don't understand why you've kept this hidden, especially from Brandon. It seems rather deceptive. Harold Winters interjected smoothly. My client has every right to her privacy regarding financial matters, just as your family does, Mrs. Reynolds. Emma has simply been exercising the same discretion that wealthy families like yours typically value. Brandon reached across the table and took Emma's hand. I don't care about the money, Emma. I never have. But I am surprised you didn't trust me with this. Emma squeezed his hand. It wasn't about trust, not exactly. My grandmother always said that money changes how people see you. Once they know, they never look at you the same way again. I wanted us to build something real before adding this complication. Samuel cleared his throat. Perhaps we should all take some time to review both agreements and reconvene tomorrow. This is unexpected. Actually, Emma said, her voice gentle but firm, we don't have the luxury of time. We're getting married the day after tomorrow. I propose we work through this tonight. Brandon nodded in agreement. Dad, Emma's right. We need to resolve this now. For the next 2 hours, the two sets of attorneys negotiated terms while Emma and Brandon stepped outside to the hotel's terrace overlooking the lake. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Emma said as they stood at the railing, the wind from the lake ruffling her hair. After meeting your parents and feeling how they looked down on me, I became protective of my grandmother's legacy. She worked so hard for what she built, and I didn't want it to become something that defined our relationship. Brandon shook his head. I should be the one apologizing. I've known how my parents can be, and I should have prepared you better, or stood up to them more firmly. He paused. Is your company really worth $2 million? Emma smiled. Actually, we just closed a deal with the Chicago public school system that will likely push that valuation higher. The adaptive learning software we've developed has shown promising results in early trials. Brandon stared at her with a mixture of amazement and pride. You're extraordinary, Emma Wilson, and I'm the luckiest man alive that you still want to marry me despite my family's behavior. Speaking of which, Emma said, glancing back toward the dining room, shall we go see if they've come to terms? When they returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Samuel was engaged in earnest conversation with Harold Winters, all condescension gone from his manner. Rebecca sat slightly apart, her posture rigid but her expression thoughtful. We've drafted a revised agreement, Harold announced as Emma and Brandon took their seats. One that protects both families' assets fairly while acknowledging the partnership you're creating together. Samuel nodded. It's equitable. And frankly, Emma, I owe you an apology. We made assumptions that were unfounded. Rebecca smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her silk blouse. We were only trying to protect our son and our family legacy. As was I, Emma replied evenly. My grandmother built something meaningful from nothing. She taught elementary school for 40 years while making careful investments with every spare dollar. Her legacy deserves the same respect as yours. Brandon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled. That's Alice from the Drake's event planning team. She wants to confirm our final numbers for the reception. The mention of the wedding seemed to break the remaining tension. Rebecca's shoulders relaxed slightly. Have you finalized the seating arrangements? I noticed Cousin Margaret was still listed at table 11, but after her divorce— Mom, Brandon interrupted gently, Emma has handled all of that. In fact, she's managed most of the wedding planning while also running her company. Samuel raised an eyebrow. This software company of yours, what exactly does it do? For the first time that evening, Emma felt on comfortable ground. We develop adaptive learning programs for children with different learning styles. The software identifies how each child processes information best and adjusts its teaching methods accordingly. Fascinating, Samuel said, and to Emma's surprise, he seemed genuinely interested. My firm has been looking at educational initiatives as part of our pro bono work. Perhaps there's some collaboration potential there. As the conversation continued, Emma noticed Brandon watching her with a proud smile. He leaned over and whispered, "You're amazing. You know that? The way you've handled all of this. I've never been more certain I'm marrying the right person." Later, as they were leaving the hotel, Rebecca pulled Emma aside. "I misjudged you," she said quietly. "It wasn't just about the money. I was protecting my son from what I perceived as someone not from our world. I was wrong." Emma studied her future mother-in-law's face, seeing vulnerability there for the first time. "Your world and mine aren't as different as you might think. We both value hard work, education, and family. Those are the things that matter, not bank accounts or addresses." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I hope you can forgive our approach. It was clumsy. We're going to be family," Emma replied. "That means learning to understand each other better. This is just the beginning." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with sunlight streaming through the windows of Emma's hotel suite at the Drake. Her 3 bridesmaids bustled around her, adjusting her veil and helping with last-minute details. "You look absolutely stunning," said Julia, her best friend since college and maid of honor. "Brandon is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Emma smoothed the delicate lace of her gown, thinking about how much had changed in the past 48 hours. The prenuptial agreement had been signed by all parties, fair and equitable to both families. More importantly, something fundamental had shifted in her relationship with the Reynolds family. A knock at the door revealed Rebecca Reynolds, elegant in a pale blue mother-of-the-groom ensemble. "May I come in? I wanted a moment with Emma before the ceremony." Julia raised an eyebrow at Emma, who nodded. "We'll go check on the flowers," Julia said, ushering the other bridesmaids out. Rebecca entered, carrying a small velvet box. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice softer than Emma had ever heard it. "Truly radiant." "Thank you," Emma replied. "You look lovely as well." Rebecca handed her the velvet box. "This has been in the Reynolds family for 4 generations. Each bride has worn it on her wedding day." Emma opened the box to find a stunning sapphire and diamond bracelet. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Samuel's grandmother started the tradition," Rebecca explained as she helped fasten the bracelet around Emma's wrist. "She was a formidable woman who married into the family when they had very little. She worked alongside her husband to build what eventually became the foundation of the Reynolds law practice." Emma looked up in surprise. "I didn't know that." Rebecca smiled ruefully. "We don't talk about it much." Somewhere along the way, the family narrative shifted to one of uninterrupted privilege. But the truth is, every generation has had to work to maintain and grow what came before. The parallel to Emma's own grandmother was striking. "Thank you for sharing that with me. And for this," she said, touching the bracelet. "I'm honored to wear it." Rebecca hesitated, then spoke again. "I want you to know that I see now what Brandon has always seen in you. Your strength, your intelligence, your integrity. Those qualities will serve both of you well." She paused. "And I hope that in time, you might see me as more than just Brandon's difficult mother." Emma smiled. "I'd like that." Another knock at the door announced it was time. As they walked toward the ceremony, Rebecca whispered, "Welcome to the family, Emma. Truly." The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel had been transformed into an elegant wedding venue, with white roses and twinkling lights creating a magical atmosphere. As Emma walked down the aisle toward Brandon, she saw Samuel Reynolds give her a respectful nod, a gesture that would have seemed impossible just days ago. Brandon's face lit up as he watched her approach, his eyes filled with love and admiration. When she reached him, he whispered, "You are the most incredible woman I've ever known. I can't believe I get to spend my life with you." As they exchanged vows, Emma thought about her grandmother Rose, who had taught her that true worth came from character, not currency. She would have approved of this moment, not because Emma had proven herself to the Reynolds family, but because she had remained true to herself throughout. The reception was in full swing, the dance floor crowded with jubilant guests celebrating the union of the Reynolds and Wilson families. Emma and Brandon had just finished their first dance when Samuel Reynolds approached, asking for the next dance with his new daughter-in-law. "I hope you know," he said as they moved across the floor, "that my son is a better man because of you. The way you handled yourself this week showed me exactly why he fell in love with you." Emma smiled. "Brandon is pretty special himself. He stood by me even when it would have been easier to side with his family. That meant everything." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "He has his mother's backbone. Speaking of which, I think Rebecca has been talking Julia's ear off about your company for the past 20 minutes. He nodded toward a corner where Rebecca and Julia were deep in conversation. Emma laughed. "Julia is my chief operations officer. If Rebecca is interested in educational technology, she's talking to the right person." "I think interested might be an understatement," Samuel replied. "She was a teacher before we married. Did you know that? She's never found a suitable outlet for that passion since." This was yet another revelation about the Reynolds family that Emma hadn't expected. "No, Brandon never mentioned that. There's a lot we haven't shared outside the family," Samuel admitted. "Perhaps that's been a mistake." Later, as Emma and Brandon prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Rebecca approached with Julia. "Emma, your friend here has been telling me about your company's work with dyslexic students," Rebecca said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It sounds remarkable. I wonder if you might consider having lunch when you return from your honeymoon. I have some thoughts about potential applications for special education classrooms." Emma exchanged a surprised glance with Brandon, who was beaming. "I'd love that," she replied sincerely. As they made their way to the exit through a shower of rose petals, Brandon squeezed her hand. "Well, that was unexpected. My mother hasn't been this excited about something in years." Emma smiled. "People are full of surprises." "Including you," he said, kissing her cheek. "Especially you." They paused at the hotel entrance, looking back at their families and friends. The Reynolds and the Wilsons, now joined together, each bringing their own strengths, histories, and legacies to this new beginning. "Ready for our adventure?" Brandon asked. Emma nodded, thinking not just of their honeymoon, but of the life they would build together. One based on mutual respect, honesty, and the knowledge that true worth came from character, not bank accounts. "More than ready," she replied, stepping into their future. If this story of hidden strength and unexpected connections moved you, please subscribe to the channel for more narratives that explore the complexities of human relationships. Like this video to let me know you enjoyed it, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your support helps bring more stories like Emma's to life. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember that our true worth lies in who we are, not what we possess.